Hey guys, welcome back. We are here today on Facts Matter with Roman. Brain implants for everyone. America's biggest obstacle to the WEF agenda. And for those of you guys that are not familiar, the WEF is the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland. I think it is.
Yes.
What do you think about the idea of that an unelected body of extraordinarily powerful corporations and philanthropists are trying to set the stage for basically mandating what other countries are going to do?
So that's more of a world government. I was wondering if they could do a brain implant. What is it that they're trying to implant? If it's intelligence, I can think of a number of people in Washington, D.C. who could use that implant. So I might not be so opposed to it if our elected officials are required to have it. So what is it exactly that they're trying to implant, this implant?
I believe it's tracking it's probably tracking things like biometrics, is tracking what you eat, it's tracking probably everything that it can do through the brain, but also physical location. I'm not 100% sure. So
that's what our cell phones were for.
Maybe those
And
are going
Google.
maybe those are going to the way of the dinosaur.
Oh, maybe.
So
Yeah.
let's see what Roman has to say. Let's get into this.
It's once again everyone's favorite time of the year. The World Economic Forum is currently holding their annual meeting over in Davos, Switzerland. This is, of course, the meeting wherein the world's elites come together on both their private jets and their giant motorcades in order to mingle, in order to plan out the future, and also, ironically, in order to lay the groundwork for reducing the world's carbon footprint. And the beauty of this particular event, of the World Economic Forum's annual meeting, is that this is where, very often, the quiet part is said out loud. That's because even though at this event most of the real discussions still happen behind closed doors, well, the public-facing speeches and the panel discussions that are had, well, they do still allow common plebes, like you and me, to get a small glimpse into what the global elites, who hold many of the levers of power within our societies, are planning for the future. Now, in previous years, we've gotten quite a few interesting tidbits on what these plans look like. Things like tracking the carbon footprint of each individual person using their credit card, placing little microchips inside of medicine in order to track whether a patient took it or not in order to increase compliance, implanting smartphones into people's bodies. These are the types of innovative ideas that are floated each year at the World Economic Forum. And this year, in 2023, well, it appears that things are going in the very same direction, evidenced by Mr. Klaus Schwab himself, the founder and chairman of the World Economic Forum.
Can you imagine that in 10 years when we are sitting here, we have an implant in our brains, and I can immediately feel, because you all will have implants, I can measure your brain waves, and I can immediately tell you how the people react, or I can feel how the people react to your answers. Is it imaginable?
Furthermore, within just several hours of this year's event kicking off, we were treated to Mr. John Kerry giving us his thoughts on what the event can accomplish. Take a listen.
And when you stop and think about it, it's pretty extraordinary that we, select group of human beings, because of whatever touched us at some point in our lives, are able to sit in a room and come together and actually talk about saving the planet. I mean, it's so almost extraterrestrial.
And of course, we can't forget Mr. Tony Blair, the former Prime Minister of Britain, who just a few days ago was talking about the need to track whether people were vaccinated or not well into the future. Take a listen.
You need to know who's been vaccinated and who hasn't been. Some of the vaccines that will come on down the line will be multiple. There'll be multiple shots. So you've got to have, for reasons to do with the healthcare more generally, but certainly for a pandemic or for vaccines, you've got to have a proper digital infrastructure. And many countries don't have that. In fact, most countries don't have that.
And so,
Hitler was working on it.
In mind, one of the main topics that will be discussed at this
Pretty sure
year's
Hitler
World
never
Economic
died.
Forum is the topic of ESG.
He just went to
which stands
Switzerland
for environmental,
with everyone
social, and
else.
corporate governance.
Change his name
While
to
a
Schwab.
sympathetic interpretation of
The
ESG
Schwab.
is that it forces companies to be more inclusive, more diverse, and perhaps more environmentally friendly.
Unless
but there is
you
another
don't
way to
have
look at it, which is
the
that it's
shot.
actually a way for these Davos individuals who share in this ideology to force their agenda upon other nations. They use the business sector when they can't achieve their aims through normal political channels. Now, I myself, probably just like many of you watching this video, I'm still waiting for my invitation to the World Economic Forum to arrive by mail. I'm sure it's just running a bit late. And so in lieu of that, today we're joined by Mr. Kevin Stocklin. He's a financial reporter for the Epoch Times as well as a film producer, with his most recent project being the Shadow State documentary. And he broke down for us the World Economic Forum's agenda for this year, how it connects to ESG, and what it actually means in practical terms for you and me. And so smash that like button, smash that subscribe button, and take a listen.
Exactly. So one of the hallmarks of the ESG movement is the ability to use corporations to do what the government cannot legally do. So I can give you some examples of this. It is illegal, for example, for the U.S. government to create a database of firearms owners in the United States. Well, they've been able to get MasterCard and Visa and American Express to set up merchant category codes to track purchases. So in this way, they're able to follow any purchases that Americans might make in a gun shop or a sporting goods store that sells guns.
Why would they do that?
You are not allowed to censor speech. That's something the federal government can't do, but they're able to get Twitter to do it. And all of that scandal is now coming out to light, how the FBI may well have colluded with Twitter to censor political speech leading up to the 2020 election campaign.
They don't want to get banned on YouTube.
There are a number of ways that they've been able to use corporations to do what the government is prohibited from doing according to our Constitution.
Yeah, and you mentioned the courts and sort of American traditional values, which is something I'm kind of really keeping front of mind as I watch the WEF this year, because, for instance, you had the I believe it was a member of the European Parliament from Czechia, from the Czech Republic, coming out and saying something along the lines of, well, the U.S. is also going to implement anti-hate speech laws in the near future. And when I was watching that, I'm thinking, well, either she knows something I don't, or she doesn't understand the American legal system, because we have a very strong First Amendment protections. And so with this ESG movement, do you believe that it sort of squares with the U.S. Constitution and the laws we have in the books and the sort of the ethos of the American way, or is it because they're using the business sector rather than politics? It sort of doesn't matter because businesses, don't necessarily have to abide by the Constitution in the same way that, let's say, the government does.
I would say that the United States and the U.S. Constitution is by far the biggest problem for the WEF and the ESG movement.
Right after the Bible.
Not just that we guarantee rights such as free speech and things like that. It is also that we have laws against a lot of the things that the ESG movement is trying to do. For example, we have an antitrust law that says it is illegal for companies to collude against other companies or other industries. What's a better example of corporate collusion than getting together once a year in Davos and signing a pledge that you're going to take out the oil and gas industry? We have civil rights laws that says that a lot of the components of the social justice part of ESG are illegal. You cannot discriminate. You cannot set quotas against people on the basis of race or gender or anything else. So these laws are huge problems. In addition, our whole system of federalism, which gives rights to the states and limits the power of the federal government, is an enormous problem for the WEF because they try to leverage national governments to force these policies on people, whether it's bans on internal combustion engines or bans on hate speech and this sort of a thing. So right now, I think when they look at their number one problem, it's the United States and our traditions and our legal system and our Constitution.
All right, the sponsor of today's episode is a phenomenal.
All right, we'll go ahead and kill it there. I think that gives a good idea of where that's at.
It's interesting is that the Constitution would, if you or I came after somebody and told them, hey, we don't like you because you're black or you're Hispanic or whatever it happened to be. And we just said, hey, you're not allowed to, you should be allowed to work and blah, 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 blah. Well, you'd end up getting arrested. Right. And that's what would happen. Whether or not they could make the charges stick, you'd get arrested. But when a business says, "Hey, you know what?" or colleges, example, is when they rate who's going to be able to get the scholarships, or you checked all the boxes, but you're white. And so you're losing some points because of your race, your skin color. But if it was the other way around, and they said that if it was someone who's Black, Hispanic, or Asian, that ACLU would be going bonkers, and the federal government would intervene. And you can't have, it's not reverse discrimination, because it's what it's been called. They go, if they were discriminating because you're white, that's reverse. No, it's discrimination, period. And what they do is they break these bad, these cruel and unusual treatments, if you will, down into these little subcategories, so that they can use it against somebody of whatever race it happens to be, and then not against others. And if you're a racist, you could be a Black racist, you could be a white racist, you could be an Asian racist, you could be a Black nationalist, you could be a white nationalist, you could be an Asian nationalist. But they break it down and go, but there's these little exceptions, and it's wrong. And the problem is they're teaching it in the grammar schools, the preschools, the junior highs or middle schools, and in the high schools, then certainly through the colleges. And so what's happened is these kids have been educated throughout this whole process into generations now, whether in the 30s and 40s, for sure, and they're molded to believe this is right. That's why you see some of these idiots still running around wearing masks.
Yep. I mean, what's the number right now of patriotism amongst generations, regardless of the age of the generation, right? So take millennials, that's my generation. And you're right, it's like late 20s to very, very, very early 40s. If not, I think it might just be late 30s. And it's about 30% of the population are patriotic, meaning they're at least glad they live in this country. That's the baseline for patriotism. Does
that count the illegal immigrants who are glad they live in this country, move here? Because I bet a lot of them are happier than the people who were born here.
Nationalized Americans, meaning like they're born here.
Citizens
of the United States. Because you could be citizen and immigrated here. I mean, people born
lawfully, absolutely.
Born and raised here, millennials of that range. So, just call it late 20s to early 40s.
Yeah.
But that number has been 30% even since that age group were 16, 17, 18. Because that age group went through 9/11, yada, 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 so on and so forth. Gen Z, I believe the number is 13%.
What's Gen Z's age brackets?
Right now, they are the late 20s to 16, 17. They're your college kids now. A lot of people say all the college kids are millennial. That's not the case. The college kids that when millennials were college kids, that was 10, 12 years, 13, 14 years ago.
Yeah. Interesting.
And it's cut in half. Those numbers make a great argument for what you're saying in regards to the indoctrination is working.
Yeah, it's absolutely working, and you see it working in almost every aspect. You see it in business, you see it in through the education system, you see it in even the walk of faith, if you will, patriotism certainly, and it's a shame that that they're aiding in undoing the country that's given them the ability to be able to have that opinion, and. Freedom of speech is important in this country, but when you have freedom of speech and it's protected and you're lying like through the news media, I got an issue with it. Right. And when you're misdirected, how you curb that? I mean, they used to pretty much censor the news, but you would at least hope that it was truthful. And how to get people to start actually having the desire to be truthful and be honest is something that you're not going to be able to legislate. That's
Right.
something that's going to come from their parents, and hopefully and be emboldened through their education, maybe through some government service in the military or whatever. And that
I don't know if
and
I'd
then
use military for that. You know, they're
well,
giving free trans surgeries and all that stuff, and diversity and inclusion training and CRT now as mandatory training requirements for their 18-year-old, new recruits.
I was thinking the other day that somebody had mentioned something on Facebook about there's some kids getting off a bus, an old picture of probably in the 70s, maybe 60s, get off the bus at one of the Marine Corps recruit depots. There's one in Paris Island, and then there's another one in San Diego. And they were getting off, and there was all these comments on there. And I was thinking about that is because it was quite an abrupt welcoming you get from those drill instructors. And but
they
I was
got rid
thinking,
of that now. The shark attack is gone.
I was thinking of the cadences we used to say. They could not have been more politically incorrect, horrendous. I mean, so we're laughing about it. We didn't care. What do we care, right? We're going out. We're figuring we could get shot or whatever. We're going to war. We can learn whatever we got to learn, right? And last thing we cared about is how politically incorrect, which that word that sentence, that phrase wasn't even around. The cadence was, and I mean, what we thought our names were whatever the drill instructors were calling us, which was anything but a compliment, and anything but politically correct or socially correct. And but now, when my youngest son went through the Marine Corps, through boot camp in 2009, I believe it was, and I asked him on the phone. He had called because every now and again they were allowed to call, not very often, but he called, and I asked him, "Go, hey, well, they beat the hell out of you yet?" And he goes, "No, Dad, they're not even allowed to touch us." I'm like, "Well, you're not going to be a Marine unless they kick the crap out of you at least 2 or 3 times, boot camp."
They wait till you're in the sandbox now.
Yeah, well, it's things have changed a lot, and what's happening is this America's become soft and becoming softer all the time, and that won't bode well in a war.
No, wars
happen. Ask Ukraine, ask Russia. I mean, ask some of the countries in the Middle East. A war's not going to ask Israel. As soft doesn't bode well for soldiers, and Marines, or sailors. Nope. And we better toughen up. And if parents don't want to toughen up their kids and we lose our country, it's because it's on us. It's really on us. I mean, we can only do so much within our sphere of influence, but we should all be shouting about it. And nobody wants to go to war, but we should always be prepared for it because you never know. And the people who attack you, I mean, you could take Pearl Harbor or World War II. Japan didn't warn us. They didn't say, "Oh, we're going to have a secret sneak attack on Pearl Harbor, on December 7th, 1941. And so you guys can get ready. We want to give you a little notice." Their plan was just to give us half an hour's notice or hour's notice, whatever it was. And that didn't work. And who believes it anyways? And but I mean, you're going to war. It's like getting in a fist fight. You're not in a fist fight because you're loving each other.
Right.
I mean, it's like hate crime for a black guy and a white guy getting in a fight. And then, well, if the white guy wins, it's going to be a hate crime for sure. Right. Because the guy's black. And, or if it's a white guy murders a black guy, then it's a hate crime. And, but it's still murder. I mean, if it's murder, it's murder. It doesn't matter what color it is. It's not, all murder is a hate crime for the most part. If it's murder, it's a hate crime, but why tack it on? And, but what they're doing is they're taking the definitions of words and changing them, and hence they're changing the thought process of the young and of the citizens. I mean, just think about the words that you used to use that weren't offensive, but now have been deemed offensive, right? But not insulting or hurtful.
I still say them. I still say them.
Yeah. Well, you should. I refuse to change it. It's the new meaning. My wife was reading something yesterday, I think it was, and it said that it was something like the new meaning of this word. Right. And it's like, the hell is that? You know, it's the word still means what it means.
In Yuri Bezmenov's words, it's subversion of the language.
Yeah, it is subversion of the language, and you know, and if you don't know, there was a guy, I forgot where he was, and he used the word that meant lazy. I'm not going to say it because we'll end up in trouble with it. But it wasn't the word that everybody thought he said. It was different. Didn't spell different, pronounce different, close. But and he ended up getting railroaded over it, and it meant nothing like these idiots who have the vocabulary of a slug. But they wanted to manipulate that conversation, those words, because they didn't like him, to mean something that he didn't even say.
Right.
And it's because of your lack of intelligence, your lack of education, or your corrupted morality, a sense of morality, is then they suppress everybody. And what we're doing is we're dropping the levels of education, everything else, to the lowest possible denominator in this country, and we're sinking. Kind of, well, your boat sails 100% of the time, you know, and it doesn't sink. But these guys' boats, because they don't have the kind of money, they sink, you know, and they get 100 yards offshore. So you're going to have to poke some holes in that boat of yours, because you're making them feel bad, you know. It's ridiculous. And, you know, strive to be the best. Strive to be the best. It's easy to be. I told my kids this. And I tell a lot of the young guys this. Says, you know, it's easy to be in the top 10% because 90% aren't trying.
Right.
And that's
the
the
next
truth.
It's the next 10% that's hard to get.
Yeah. Well, bust their hump and put the phone down and quit playing whatever you're playing on the phone and get to work.
Yep.